This is a true story about the strangest and probably most demented Oblivion mod I've ever come across. What makes that true is the fact that it is more than just a mod. It's something else. To this day, I'm baffled as to what it really was, or how the hell most of it was even possible. It all started about a year ago, after 2 years of playing the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, out of the main quest, guilds, Shivering Isles, and Knights of the Nine. I finally began filling up on a bunch of mods that even looked remotely appealing to me. Anyway, one day I was browsing through Planet Elder Scrolls, and one mod in particular caught my attention. It had no screenshots, and the description simply read, "High level and skilled only, please." The file itself was a single .esp, only a byte large. I was clueless as to what it could be, which either unfortunately or perhaps fortunately brought me to give it a whirl. I downloaded it and opened up Windows Explorer, only to find, to my surprise, that it also came with a .txt file. The text file was named, in all caps, "Help," while the ESP file was named "Him." I opened the text file. The only thing in it was a short yet strange message. "Killed him after he killed her. Lost game disk. Someone else do it or curse." I couldn't help but laugh after reading the lack of meaning and grammar on the note. I should have known it was probably just some 10-year-old noob modder trying to make a pathetic quest. But I decided to proceed with placing it into my data, as it may have been a cool foreign upload and maybe would have some neat, interesting mystery plot. I loaded up the .esp and started the game. Upon loading my character, a level 71 Imperial Knight named Joe for the hell of it, I immediately spawned in a pitch-black cave with no music or typical ambiance, just dead silence. I luckily had a few torches on me. I lit one only to find it was a particularly cramped, straight tunnel with no door behind me. I had no choice but to advance forward. After 10 seconds of running, I entered a large chamber with a single small wooden door at the opposite side. There was blood everywhere, however, and not like the typical Oblivion blood decals you see in the arena. It looked so real. It had to be one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen in a game. I was able to see teeth scattered on the ground, along with a few fingers and bones, all of them looking way much more realistic than the in-game render ever could. It gave me shivers, and I hesitated to even open the door, but I had no other option, so I activated the door. I was now standing in what looked like a typical fort interior, except with, again, the same blood and gore scattered everywhere. I only took about 5 steps when I suddenly heard a distant voice say,
"Welcome, player."
Now, I was annoyed. I had always been a hardcore role player, and breaking the fourth wall like that was enough to make you quit the game. However, the escape button was no longer working at all. I decided I would attempt to bail out via the console commands, cheating, but the console didn't work either. I couldn't quit, and I couldn't cheat. What the hell? I progressed forward without encountering any enemies, traps, or containers. Just a straight, featureless, and very dark tunnel, with no music playing, but I heard very faint screams of sort, like tortured souls from hell. But I ignored it, and just kept looking for something to do in this already abnormal mod. I soon heard the voice again, but this time it was considerably closer and louder.
Fucking finally, I'm free!
The screaming souls grew louder, and I began to hear the distant running of someone else coming from down the hallway. Soon the man appeared, a horrifying-looking person who was only in his underwear and had 3 rotting gunshot wounds on his torso. His head was also obviously cracked and decaying as well. The most intimidating thing about him was that he looked just like a person in real life, and he was gripping a machete and seemed to be full of intense psychotic rage. He charged at me screaming, and I held up my shield. To my surprise, though, he instead bent down slightly and began hacking away at my exposed legs. My character's health began to diminish very quickly, as the man was performing many unorthodox maneuvers to counter the game's combat. I managed to heal with a couple of healing potions, and finally landed a hit on him. He screamed in agony in a demonic-sounding voice, and his model got a giant slice across his chest as a reward from where I struck, and then seemed to disintegrate that section of his body. I decided that running and swinging my sword constantly was the best option to avoid his usual fence, and according to my meter on my crosshair, finally chipped away half of his health. By now, his entire body was burned up, with just his skull glowing with red eyes. My armor was also beginning to break, and my health was depleting rapidly. The man was constantly hacking away and screaming with insanity all the while. I was lucky to actually deflect any of his attacks with the shield. I finally decided to quit my current strategy, which I knew would get me killed, and did a lunge attack, which at the master level was a stab, which completely impaled the man. Despite having my volume set to a reasonable level, his scream was loud enough to hurt my ears. As his body soon became engulfed in flames and burst before he hit the ground. The level was filled with silence yet again. But then, I saw that there was now an opening where the man came from. I walked inside. The room I entered was very dimly lit, with only a small wooden chair in the center and a straitjacket sitting in the corner. Resting in front of the chair, however, were old, real-life newspapers with the man in them. Apparently, he was hopelessly insane and was held in an asylum for quite some time until he was erroneously deemed stable and released. Then I found a photograph of a woman. This made me think back to the help text note. I quickly understood everything. The insane man went to the uploader's house and brutally murdered his wife. The husband responded by shooting him 3 times, which resulted in the man busting his head on something when he fell. The husband somehow contained the man's soul in the .esp file. Somehow, necromancy. Or the insane man haunted it. Either way, since the husband's Oblivion game was lost, he had to find someone who could finish the job and destroy his evil soul once and for all, or else allow him to kill even more in spirit form. I have no idea whether this is true or some really fucked up story, but whatever it is, I still have nightmares about that man, screaming in pure rage. First off, if you've never played a game called The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, this might be a little hard to follow, so I'll give you the basic information that you'll need to understand this. Oblivion is a game created by Bethesda that focuses on the continent of Tamriel and the province named Cyrodiil. Cyrodiil faces a crisis in which portals to another dimension are opening and allowing Daedra, which are basically their version of demons, to invade the province. Most of the storyline doesn't really matter to the story I'm telling you, though. Just know that the game allows you to do a lot of stuff aside from the main storyline. There's also a program that lets people make mods, which are plug-in files that alter the original game. I was working on a dungeon mod that I named The Forbidden Caverns. When this all started, the dungeon was supposed to be filled with Daedra for the player to fight their way through. I was checking the size of the dungeon that I had made to see if it needed to be expanded or retracted. When I first saw it, a figure on the far side of a tunnel. The cave was too dark to see exactly what it was. All I know is that it was humanoid in form and was wearing dark clothing. I found this odd because I had not added any creatures or NPCs to that dungeon cell yet. So I made my way over to where I thought I saw the figure. Taking a side path that would let me sneak up to it, which I needed to check anyway, but nothing was there when I reached it. At first, I figured I must have simply imagined it, that it was really just some illusion caused by the darkness of the cave. I continued working on my mod, little by little, without incident for a few days, when I decided to take a break and actually play the game for a while. Eventually, I found myself in another cave, this one just containing monsters. I fought through it for a while with nothing unusual, until I got to the last section. I was nearing the final room when, again, I saw a dark-dressed figure just far enough to hide its features. Once again, I tried to get near it, and once again, there was nothing to find. I decided that something must be there. Maybe a bad script that can sometimes alter AI pathways. That had to be the cause, right? When I checked my mod, there was nothing that would have caused this. No figures to appear, no spawning, no accidentally altered scripts, no changes to any AI packages. So I turned off the mod just in case I had missed anything. A week went by without anything unusual happening, so I figured it must have been a problem with my mod. I decided to leave it inactive until I had time to look at it more thoroughly again. It had to be the mod, in-game, so I returned to the Imperial City. After some heavy adventuring and selling some of the loot I picked up, I found a bandit NPC laying dead in the market district for no apparent reason. Nothing else seemed out of the ordinary. There were regular citizens around the city just doing what they normally do. No guards seemed out of place, and there were no other dead characters in sight. I didn't know what to tell myself this time, but I figured there had to be a reason. I decided that I would check any mods I had recently installed to see if I could find out the cause. After checking every mod I had installed in the last month, I still found nothing. It can't come from anything older than these. I would have seen all this strange stuff sooner, I told myself. I decided that somehow my save probably has been corrupted or something, so I made a new character and began my adventure over. Everything was normal again for 3 or 4 weeks. No dead NPCs or strange, unwelcome figures out of place. It wasn't until I did the Wandering Scholar quest for the Fighters Guild that strange things began happening again. I had cleared out the first part of Brittle Rock Cave and walked to her to the ruined statue. I expected her to give me her normal lines, but instead, she said something very different. "It's coming for you." I didn't know what to think at this point. The line was spoken with the same voice acting and cadence that they use for all the high elf females. So it couldn't have been a mod. At this point, I said fuck it. I turned the game off. I did not even care. I didn't save. The next day, I decided to get back on the game. I told myself that since it was pretty late, I was getting tired. I must have imagined it. I went back through the cave and cleared out, then escorted Elante back to the statue. This time, she used her normal quest dialogue like she's supposed to. As I always do, I went in and cleared the next part of the cave before returning to the town of Anvil to turn in my quest. Nothing unusual occurred during this time. I then had to go to the town of Cheydinhal to get my next quest, and that's when things began getting weird again. In front of the Fighters Guild was a dead conjurer. At first, I thought he was the one from the Spell Tome DLC that seeks you out and tries to kill you. But when I checked his inventory, there was no Spell Tome. Telling myself it must have been a glitch, and it was in fact the conjurer from the DLC, I continued as if nothing happened. I took a trip to go see a friend for a few hours and spent the next week there. When I came back, I got back on the game, and what I saw shocked me. I was in the town of Breville, where I left off, but there were several dead NPCs gathered in front of the Mages Guild. Not just enemy NPCs like the last 2 times either. Actual named characters and everything. I took a closer look to see who they were. One was Fetid Jonhild, a beggar from Bruma. Another was Fathius Ulis, a dark elf from the Imperial City that thieves can fence stolen goods to. Another one of them was Arquin, the high elf woman from the Dark Brotherhood. 2 more were from the Mages Guild in Leowyn, Sidrasa and Agata. And the last one was Menian Goneld, the guard from Kavach that the player is forced to abandon in the plains of Oblivion. I looked through their inventories to see if there was anything else that didn't make sense. The only thing I found was a note on Menian that said, "It's coming for you." And that was 2 weeks ago. I haven't gotten back to the game since.